Welcome back, everyone. We have now come to the final event of this year's Tokyo Forum. For our wrap-up session, we have invited 6 rising stars from a range of academic disciplines. They will provide a brief synthesis of the discussions in each session and share their perspectives and opinions. These will include thoughts on how to transcend disciplinary barriers and bring people together to solve our collective problems. Joining me on stage is the moderator for this session, Professor Yagi, who also organized today's cross-disciplinary discussion. Thank you for joining us again, Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
What are you looking forward to the most in this last session?
Yeah, before answering that question, I like your terminology, rising stars. It means that the new scientists, new researchers, but still it's the rising stars. And the issue is they are watching the session behind the scene.
Exactly.
And yeah, for example, my session with Professor Michael Sandel and Ji-Hyun Lee, Robert Blasiak from the Stockholm University, he was watching. And the issue is he will bring what he got at the session to this plenary wrap-up session. And so we will exchange those views of the rising stars. So what I expect from them is exchange of their fresh views because they are very young generations and the future depends on their activities. So I very much looking forward to listening to their discussion. Thank you.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Looking forward to hearing their own opinions on how to solve our common problems. Okay, so let me introduce those speakers. First, Kelly Levin, Chief of Science Data and Systems Change at Bezos Earth Fund. She's participating from Boston. Robert Blasiak, researcher at the Stockholm Resilience Center at the University of Stockholm. He is joining us from Stockholm. Next, Tsunami Moe. There's Robert.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. We have Tsunami Moe, student in the mathematics department at the Pomona College. She's joining us from California. And Dylan G, assistant professor of Department of Psychology at Yale University. She's joining us from Connecticut. Next, a bit closer to home, we have 2 people joining us from Tokyo. Suzuki Takayuki, associate professor in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Tokyo, and he actually earlier participated in one of the sessions. Thank you. And last but not the least, Kwantan Verspiren, project assistant professor in the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today from across the globe. First, we want to look back on the discussions of this year's Tokyo Forum. And we would like to ask you to tell us 2 keywords that struck you the most and take about 2 minutes each to offer your perspectives on each session. And then after that, we will have a broader conversation on your takeaways from the forum as a whole. Okay? So, if I may, let me start with you, Kelly. Please give us your thoughts on yesterday's discussion titled Global Common Stewardship Based on Science and Empathy. Kelly?
Thank you so much. Well, what a phenomenal conference. I congratulate you all. And really just thrilled to be part of the Center for Global Commons, which led this session, which shows what truly radical collaboration can deliver. I wanted to highlight 3 themes that came out yesterday from the speakers. The first is urgency, the second is accountability, and the third is around inclusion and equity. And these came out on every single speaker's comments. On urgency, we know that we're seeing some progress. It's not enough. We talked about needing 7 to 8% emission reductions every single year. We saw this in a number of different reports. that showed that we are simply not moving at the pace and scale that's required to meet global climate change goals and also sustain other parts of the global commons. In terms of accountability, we have tremendous commitments coming out of Glasgow around deforestation, around climate finance, around methane, around a whole host of other sectoral commitments, which would have been unthinkable a few years ago. But nevertheless, we are seeing a tremendous emissions gap. And a very big credibility gap. So how are we going to hold these actors accountable? And Jeff Sachs also talked about not having a system of justice either. So accountability came out as a second theme. And the last one was really around inclusion and equity, needing active participation. We heard about spillover effects and a real divide between those that are incurring damage versus those that are making it, needing to level the playing field. And I guess just in conclusion, all of the speakers really talked about needing fit for purpose architecture to steward the global commons for all, inclusion of the voices of the South, an institution that really will take care of the global commons. And my two words just in closing, one is urgency in action, and the second is fitting, something that is more fitting for the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Next, let's go to Robert from Stockholm, who will share his thoughts on the session, Trust Building for Collective Action. Robert?
Thank you so much, Yamamoto-san. And it was a really inspiring session led by Professor Yagi with Michael Sandel and Ji-Hyun Lee. And they were talking about the biggest ideas you could think of, about harmony, about nature, about our relationship with the world. And I was really kind of surprised in this session by how frequently this group of scientists used words like love, used words like care. And it was clear to me that this is something that you can't just describe it with an equation. It's also an emotional connection that we have with the world. And that's also exemplified by some of the examples that Professor Yagi gave of cormorant fishing in Nagano Prefecture in Japan, a tradition stretching back for hundreds and hundreds of years, and of collective fisheries management in this country. But what got me really excited maybe was some points that Ji-Hyun ended on towards the end of the session, where I think the focus shifted a bit more to the future, not just harmony with nature as something that we achieved in the past or that we need to think about in today's world, but also what can it be in the future? What is our future relationship with nature? And technology is part of it. But is it going to be a good part of it or a bad part of it? And I think Ji-Hyun gave a really nice example of seabed mining, because we know that for the energy transition, as Kelly was just mentioning, we're going to need more minerals maybe to build all of these batteries and things that are going to power this energy transition. But a lot of these are really hard to get, only found in a few places in the world. And one of those places is the international seabed, 4 kilometers down at the bottom of the ocean, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Now the question is, should we go there? Should we go and mine? And this is where my heart starts to beat, and where these words of love and care and harmony come out, because I think, yes, you can write the equations that say we need the minerals now so that we can save the climate. But at the same time, this is what humanity has been doing for the past century and a half, letting our actions be powered by our need for resources, driving around the world to get the resources wherever they are. If we have to go to the Pacific Ocean, the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and go down 4 kilometers to the bottom of the seabed, is this a good sign or a bad sign? I think it's something we need to think about very carefully, about the future of our relationship with this planet and whether this is a positive one or not.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. Now, the topic for panel 1A was Toward Building Trustworthy AI in a Society with Mutual Respect. And for this, we'd like to turn to Tsunami Moe in California and hear her reflections on this. So Moe.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And it's been such an honor to listen today during the panels. in our panel towards building trustworthy AI in society with mutual respect, the keywords for me were documentation and redefining problems. We had speakers who were really building coalitions across a wide range of academia, industry, policymakers. So we heard really closely about what the process entails of actually building these partnerships across sectors. So for documentation, we heard from Rebecca Finlay, a partnership of AI, on how it was critical to be building not only repositories of knowledge and glossaries and step-by-step guides of how to turn principles into practice, but also creating resources for building resources so that folks in industry can translate what best practices that they're taking part in a way that could translate values like fairness and transparency in action in the world. As for redefinition, we heard about 2 use cases and how redefining problems is a key part of building coalitions. From AV1 Beisberg of University of Bonn, we heard about the work that it is taking right now to frame the debate around sustainability and AI in the same way that the debate around privacy has been now reframed along the lines of data. There's work to be done in what does it mean? What are the relevant aspects of sustainability? How do you define that problem? What's relevant? Water usage, land usage, electronic waste, carbon emissions. There's some conceptual work to do there. We also heard about another use case along drug discovery for Professor Alice O of KAIST. And we heard about how the partnerships that she is facilitating is defining the problem of how do you get AI to be leveraged more for drug discovery. And then finally, I want to close by bringing the themes of the panel back to the theme of the entire conference itself about the human mind. I want to end with a phrase from Professor Desai of humans in the loop, and what these 2 concepts of documentation and redefining problems bring to light is the role of human minds in building these coalitions. We need to use human minds to define problems, to document best practices. And this is really a broader manifestation of the role of humans and the role of partnerships in allowing AI to be leveraged responsibly. Thank you.
All right, sounds good, Moe. Thank you very much. Next, we want to hear thoughts on panel 1B, the resilient brain, mental health in balance with society and the planet. And for this, let's go over to Dylan in the East Coast. Dylan?
Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. This has been such a powerful forum, and it's really exciting to see all of the synergy across disciplines. So panel 1B, I think, was particularly powerful. We were hearing about adversity and resilience at both individual and societal levels. Professor Hensch talked about how can we build a resilient mind and maintain that across the lifespan? And I think this panel really highlighted how critical it is to be thinking about this developmentally. So the 2 kind of words or themes that really struck me, the first is connection. Many of the speakers talked about the importance of social connection. So we can think of, stress as this very universal experience in our modern world, and that can have devastating impacts on our mental health, depression, anxiety, suicide. And yet social connection can be such a powerful buffer. This has, of course, been particularly salient in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So Professor Kawachi talked about social isolation following disaster and some of his really, I think, impactful data on the impact on cognitive abilities. Professor Kasai talked about prosociality and how social behavior itself and the way that the mind evolves changes across development, and even how social behaviors can be transmitted across generations. He talked about help-seeking attitudes and how they're transmitted from parents to children. So I think this has really powerful implications for targets for intervention as well. The second word kind of theme that came to mind was really change, thinking about this potential for plasticity and the opportunities that opens up for us. We can think about the potential for resilience and intervention in the context of stress and trauma. I think there were 2 particularly powerful examples of this. Professor Bavalier talked about her incredible work on action video games and how there can be, this really positive change that comes in specific cognitive training paradigms. And so thinking about how we can leverage this for good. Professor Davidson talked about mindfulness and really the power of thinking about mental well-being as a skill that we can build up. So I think, again, this has implications for, thinking about sensitive periods of plasticity. When are the periods in which we might be able to have the most impact? And how do we think about leveraging some of these targets to promote resilience, both, again, at the individual level, but also as a society?
Okay, Dylan, thank you very much. Now, the topic for panel 2A was technology and human nature. And for this, we go to Takayuki in Tokyo. Takayuki, actually, you were part of this discussion. Please share your thoughts with us.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, actually, I somehow became a participant of the session, not just watching. Anyway, the theme of the session was data and privacy. In the first talk, Professor Hashida contrasted the two types of AI, centralized AI and personal AI. And he argued that personal AI is favorable for two reasons. First, personal AI enables us to control our own personal data. And second, personal AI creates greater value than centralized AI. And in the second talk, Dr. Kabukian introduced the concept of privacy by design. She argues that when we design a new technology, we have to embed privacy protection into it. And there are two good things about this idea. First, it is proactive. It prevents harm from arising. Second, it is non-zero sum. It enables us to pursue both privacy and profit at the same time. And I picked two keywords for the session, creativity and value. The first keyword is creativity. The two talks proposed the creative solutions to the problem of data and privacy. These solutions are interesting because they can make apparently incompatible goals compatible. And the second keyword is value. Both solutions suggest that we can and we should utilize technology to promote values, important values, such as freedom, autonomy, and well-being, and so on. And that's what we should always keep in mind. And that's my quick report of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Takayuki. Now, anxiety in international relations caused by the progress of science and technology was a topic for panel 2B. And Kwantan in Tokyo will give us his report. Kwantan, hello.
Thanks, Miki. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. So the panel Anxiety Among International Relations Caused by the Progress of Science and Technology provided a very fascinating perspective on this year's Tokyo Forum's topic from the perspective of international relations. And the panelists identified three main avenues followed by states to reduce science and technology-related anxiety, sometimes going in a very different direction from the very positive concepts of harmony, respect, and love that characterized previous sessions. In fact, starting from the assumption of an anarchic world prone to escalation of tensions and conflicts, if not wars, the natural tendency of great power is to obtain or maintain peace of mind by way of securing technological superiority. And going beyond self-help, the second approach is to pursue similar goals within a coalition of like-minded partners. But finally, the third and final avenue, bringing on, I would say, a more positive outlook on the future, consists in developing a global shared understanding on potentially contentious issues through international principles, norms, and rules, or in other words, international regimes. And an interesting discussion ensued on how to ensure compliance with international norms that may be non-binding, through the identification of shared values and globally accepted patterns of behavior, but also by converging on common interests and common aversions. But far from restricting the discussion to abstract notions of international relations, the panelists provided us with a wealth of examples from real-life cases on technologies that are either worsening anxiety levels in international affairs due to their dual-use nature, such as space, artificial intelligence, or nuclear technologies, or technologies that contribute to reducing international tensions by facilitating transparency and confidence building. And to answer your question, these last words are the one that I chose and that I want everyone to remember, because they are the answer to most of our anxiety, which often stems from misunderstandings and lack of communication. So I will repeat these words: transparency and confidence building. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kontan. So, Professor Yagi, we have heard all 6 presentations. Wow. Your impression, please.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you very much. It's very impressive. And the topic of this forum, it was ranging from AI technology, resource conservation, and climate change, global commons. Those variety of issues are discussed. But most likely the keywords is representing a very similar concept. I picked up several keywords, for example, accountability, or shared value, or value, creativity, connection, documentation, and emotion. Those sort of the issues are touching upon human mind. Although the surface of the discussion is focused on those technological issues. So I was very much impressed by the observation of those rising stars, because they capture the core of the issue, and we would like to continue this discussion further.
Okay, thank you. Next, we would like to have a more general discussion of what we learned in this year's Tokyo Forum as a whole. And for this, we would like to invite another guest. Please come up on the stage, please. The president of the University of Tokyo, Fujiiteru. So welcome again, Mr. Fuji.
Thank you so much. This was a very nice opportunity for me to directly hear from young researchers who I believe are the leaders literally shaping the future. And I would love to hear some more words from them for this wrap-up.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, now let's talk about our main takeaways from this year's Tokyo Forum. First, can I go with you, Professor Yagi?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. And it's a very nice surprise for me that Professor Fuji is directly showed up and shared our views with. So I'm interested in listening to further from Robert, for example. You mentioned on the good thing and bad thing. But my understanding is there are many intermediate between good and bad. So if we decide 0 or 1, that will create a difficult situation. So Robert, how do you think after listening to many others' intervention? Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Yagi. And I completely agree with you. I think a 0 or 1, that's not a very constructive way to think about the world. Of course, we're all always somewhere in between these things. And that's probably a safer place to be. With the example of the seabed mining, I think this is a really good example, because at the same time that there's a big push by career UN delegates like Ji-hyun to ensure that all care is taken to ensure that any future mining of the international seabed will be done in a way that there's minimized ecological impact. I think that's very good. But at this very same time, there's push from the scientific community to prioritize research in this area, to understand the life there, and maybe also develop new drugs and antibiotics and things from the specific compounds that are found in this life in the deep sea. And at the very same time, there's a technology and research development being done to develop car batteries that don't need cobalt, that don't need as much lithium, that don't need these elements that maybe are pushing all of this interest in mining the deep seabed. So I think having all of these different approaches at the same time, somehow it pushes us in a general direction, which is where we're going, but maybe some of us are pushing in one area, some are pushing in another, and all together we're moving in a direction which is hopefully a better one, an optimistic one.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I like your hairstyle. Yeah, you got the PhD in my laboratory, and at that time your hair was a little bit longer than you. Okay, anyway, I would like to further ask Quentin. And you mentioned about the shared values to achieve the legally non-binding agreement among the countries. So could you elaborate a little bit more how we can achieve to conserve the global commons under those legally non-binding instruments?
Thank you very much for this tough question, I would say, and that is deeply related to my main research topic, which is the governance of outer space activities. And there are some links with what Robert just mentioned in the seabed and the high seas in general. Space is a place where no one can possess a specific area. It's the possession of everyone, I would say. And all countries are relying on some form of satellite data utilization for their daily activity. And as a matter of fact, every single action in our life depends on some form of satellite utilization, whether we realize it or not. However, space is a place where governance is extremely light. And since the 1970s, there was no concrete binding legal agreement on governing how we deal with space. And it has been problematic because many countries and many entities have been using space without really caring for its sustainability or even for the short-term safety of space assets. And it's a great challenge to now find a way to manage the long-term sustainability of space while being stuck in a position where we cannot make hard law. And all the challenge is to try to identify common views and common approach around which all the actors will converge, because everyone has an interest in having a sustainable outer space. And it is only by making this work of being transparent, of communicating, of identifying these shared values, that we'll be able to develop norms that would be self-enforceable. We don't have to make them binding. We just have to design them in a way that everyone has interest in following them. And I think that's a lesson in the case of space, but that is valid in a lot of fields, in basically all type of global commons. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so because of the time we have right now, I would like to ask the same question for 4 persons. And if you have any answers, please respond to me. My question is, the session today is Science and Human Mind. And the 6 people, young rising stars, provided their own keywords and their own views. But if you add some additional thought on that, could you tell me? Okay, so who volunteered first? Okay, maybe I will make a cold call. Suzuki-san, you ready?
Okay, I'll try. I think I picked creativity and value as the keywords, and if I add something more, I try to emphasize the importance of the vision or big picture. We have to make clear what kind of society or what kind of future we want to have. We have to make clear what kind of value we really want to promote. And without this kind of big picture or the vision for the future, using new technology might be dangerous. So it's really important to have a big vision for the future. And I think we humanities researchers, including philosophers like me, can contribute to that task. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So how about Moe?
Yeah, thank you. I think what is striking me is the flexibility of the human mind to create shared values throughout contradictions. Contradictions being that no one person can do everything. I think it was Robert who mentioned that there are different actors who are working on prioritizing different areas, and that all together we're working towards what Suzuki-san mentioned as what is the world that we are trying to create. And the flexibility of the human mind and being able to understand the constraints of individual positions, but keeping in mind the potential of collaboration, I think is what has struck me in this extremely wide-ranging conference and panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so how about Kelly? Could you let me know your idea?
Terrific, great. Yeah, so I had talked about urgency, and I guess in the context of climate change, for example, coming out of Glasgow, we know that countries' commitments, even if they're followed through, don't stack up to avoid the most dangerous climate change impacts. The commitments out of Glasgow shave off some percentage of a degree of warming, but the world is really slated still for 2.4 Celsius of warming, which is really an unrecognizable future. And I think that what we know is that study after study, whether it's climate change or another issue around the global commons, show that doing better is not the same as doing enough. And yet we do have these kind of bright spots of action where we've seen rapid exponential change, but they don't happen on their own. They need to be nurtured, and the stars kind of need to align in terms of the right incentives and leadership and policy. And the question is, how do we nurture that? And what kind of institutions do we build that are much more fit for purpose for doing so? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So she talked about something on leadership. So next speaker, I would ask President Fujii. But before turning to Professor Fujii, I would like to ask the final comments from the 6 rising stars. The final person is Dylan, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think bringing together a lot of what my fellow panelists have said, thinking about the synergy across disciplines and just the need to work together. I think it was Kelly who had mentioned this idea of radical collaboration. And I think that's something that's really struck me across the whole forum, is the need to bring knowledge from so many fields together. And really, I'm a psychologist, so I think about this from this perspective, but thinking about, the shared values, how do we bring people together, human cooperation, to really tackle some of these global challenges that we're facing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. We have an opportunity to listen to right. Professor Fujii's view. Yeah, please.
Okay. So before I'm talking about my view and also the overall impression of this forum, I just would like to pick up some of the words from their comments. And I'm impressed by the words, for example, harmony with nature, and human in the loop, and transparency and confidence building. So those are somehow related to a sort of take-home message for the audience. That's what I felt. And as I explained yesterday, for the overall, my impression for the overall this forum I explained yesterday, the UTokyo Campus advocates the importance of dialogue. And it is through dialogue that we can break through society's divisions and create new connections. And interaction where before there was isolation. And through the confidence cultivated over many years, we can deepen dialogue with diverse stakeholders, foster understanding, and work together to contribute to the global public. So listening to the comments made by young researchers and in this session, I feel that this forum is an embodiment of these ideas. So they showed us that it is possible to have multi-voice collaborations across disciplines. So I believe that this is exactly the direction in which we should be heading. So that is shaping the future.
All right. Thank you very much for the extremely interesting conversation. Well, unfortunately, time is running up, and we wish the best to all our panelists who joined us today from all over the world. And I hope your takeaways will be passed on to people around you and implemented in many ways wherever you are. So thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Yagi, for coordinating and moderating this event, and Mr. Fuji for jumping in and activating this session. Thank you so much. And also, of course, our deepest gratitude to all of you who have participated and interacted with us on your screen. Your messages will be read and shared with all of our team at Tokyo Forum, so thank you very much.